Richard Syrett's Strange Planet. Following the truth wherever it leads. Exposing evil and corruption and the secret machinations of powerful elites. Revealing the high strangeness beneath the surface of our supposed reality. Coming to you from the Great White North and his studio beneath the stairs. Here's Richard.
Hey, how are you? Welcome to the program. Hope you'll stay with us for the duration. We're here for a good time, not a long time. I'm getting tons and tons of email. You know, it's hard for me sometimes to keep track of when the conspiracy show on television is airing on Vision TV here across Canada, because it's in repeats. We're sort of in hiatus. Season 3 coming soon. There'll be an announcement. But meanwhile, the first, I guess it's 31 episodes, are sort of in constant rotation on Vision Television. So check your local listings. But I always know when it's playing, because then I start getting tons of emails of people wanting to weigh in on various topics. Here's one on reincarnation from Valerie. I don't believe in reincarnation because I believe in the Holy Bible. We live only once under the sun. I believe that people who are unsure of God's existence or who haven't read the Bible are the people who would grasp onto the idea of reincarnation. Besides, Jesus taught being born again of the Holy Spirit, not reincarnation. So there's Valerie. Thank you for that. And then I had someone with I don't know if I can't read this one on the air because he goes so far as to name names and institutions here in Toronto, but it has something to do with MK Ultra and electronic mind control, something that we've discussed on a recent episode as well of the TV show. Thank you for that. And finally, I got an email just the other day, a gentleman who said, you've got too much hair. You look like you're wearing a toupee. I can't take you seriously. Get a haircut. So I'm taking that under advisement. Thank you for that. Hey, welcome. Welcome to the program. And a very special hello and welcome to the folks down at KWTOAM 560 in Springfield, Missouri, our newest affiliate and member of the Conspiracy Show family. So, to everyone listening in the coming weeks and months on KWTOAM 560 in Springfield, salute, as they used to say on Hee Haw. And it's so good to have you aboard. Thank you. All right. In fact, I think my next guest is, I'm going to find out where he's from. I think he's from Asheville, North Carolina, which is, of course, one of our affiliates down there at WZGM or WZGM AM 1350. But we'll find out in a few moments when he joins us to talk about, this is a rather interesting take on the whole UFO phenomenon. And as my good friend Victor Vigiani says, who's listening down in Florida on a little golfing holiday, when we finally find out, when the big day comes, disclosure, or if it ever comes, when we truly find out what's behind this UFO phenomena, it probably will be nothing, what we believe. And my next guest probably concurs with that. In fact, as I say, he has a rather interesting take on that, and we're about to delve into that right now. The possibilities are endless, and they're already here, he says. He is the author of The UFO Singularity. How near is the singularity? Why are past unexplained phenomena changing our future? And where will transcending the bounds of current thinking lead? Micah Hanks has held a long fascination with the more unique scientific mysteries this world has to offer. He's a self-proclaimed but not self-righteous skeptic. He works as a writer and researcher as well as a radio personality whose work addresses a variety of unexplained phenomena. Over the last decade, his research has taken him into the studies of the more esoteric realms of the strange and unusual, as well as cultural phenomena, human history, and the prospects of our technological future as a species, as influenced by scientists and by science, rather. We are about to get into a conversation about whether or not UFOs may in fact be terrestrial in origin, possibly originating from our own technological advancement at some point in the future. After the singularity has been reached, let's find out what the singularity is all about. Micah Hanks, welcome to the Conspiracy Show. How are you?
Well, I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me tonight.
Good to have you aboard. And now, I think I read somewhere that you hail from Asheville, North Carolina. Is that true?
That is correct. Yeah, I am from Asheville, the sweet sunny South down here. It's a great place to be. And, of course, I know you have one of your affiliate stations located in this area, as you had correctly said. So, the folks down here, I don't know how many of them are going to be familiar with Micah Hanks and his work, but I actually did work in radio a bit here in this market just as well. So some of them may know, and for those who don't, well, it'll be an all-new adventure, right?
Oh, well, you've got the pipes for radio. You've got a great voice.
Thank you, Richard.
So Micah, folks can listen in down there at WZGM AM 1350. That's in the Asheville area. So what is a singularity? What does that mean exactly, Micah?
Well, it's a great question and a great place to start tonight, I suppose. When I talk about singularity, there are a lot of different things that can kind of entail. There's this, what we call a singularity archetype, okay, where this notion that humans are undergoing fundamental change and that maybe at some time in our not too distant future we'll undergo some kind of a very meaningful, significant kind of transformation, and that it will, really fundamentally change who and what humans are and what our civilization actually may come to be. When it comes to the UFO singularity, I am evoking a term that's been utilized by modern transhumanists and futurologists and the like, and it does come to mean essentially technological singularity, the creation of artificial intelligence, or perhaps supplementing natural levels of human intelligence with advanced intelligence or technologies of the future, that will allow us to reach new levels of our technological growth that we can't even conceive of right now. That essentially is what technological singularity is, and I would argue that when we look at UFO phenomenon, it appears to be in most cases an intelligently controlled phenomenon, often something that is also, some variety of machinery or kind of advanced, aeronautics that we don't know to exist and be available to humankind at present, but nonetheless something that doesn't seem so far ahead of us that we can't conceptualize aspects of the phenomenon. We're not quite there, but we're getting close, and so if it is already a technology in our midst that is a little greater than what human levels of intelligence have attained that we know of here on Earth, again, I wonder how soon we might not attain those kinds of technological abilities and the prowess that we see the UFOs employing already in our own future. That, in a nutshell, is the UFO singularity.
Okay, so it's when our level of technology, I guess, sort of reaches the same level of technology as, is currently being utilized by who's ever flying these craft around. Is that part of the idea?
That's part of the idea, yes.
Because, one could make the argument that has happened already. We have people like Ben Rich, who was the former chief of Skunk Works, who said that we now have, this is going back, 30, 40 years ago, said that we have the technology to fly E.T. home. This was supposedly said on his deathbed, and it's a rather enigmatic statement, but one could surmise that he meant that we have the capability of interstellar travel. That's going back, again, 30, 40 years. He also said that we have things in the desert, meaning, locked up in hangars, that are 50 years beyond your wildest comprehension. So maybe we've already achieved the singularity. Is that possible?
Yeah, and that's something that I get into in the book. There are a lot of different ways that this might be attained. I've speculated about everything from the potential for extraterrestrial visitation, which, really, there's a lot of evidence out there that kind of points us in that direction, but the burden of proof for the scientific community, it tends to be a little difficult for them to look at what many proclaim to be evidence of extraterrestrial intervention here on Earth already and say conclusively, yes, we can say that extraterrestrials have visited Earth. A lot of the time there seems to be this covert element to it, and yes, of course, there is this non-disclosure element just as well. These sorts of things are kept secret, and there are whistleblowers, and people come out and claim to have had clandestine sources or have been in that situation themselves, working in, upper echelons of government or secret organizations from which they're able to draw their own experiences, but it's very difficult to validate those kinds of things because of the necessary secrecy associated with them. So every now and then we do get this sort of information that points to the potential for extraterrestrial intervention or such things as reverse engineering. And then there are also those potentials that may exist where we have just incredible technologies that are working behind the scenes of human or earthly origin. And then, of course, there's also that and it's a little bit more difficult to pin down, perhaps more so even than an extraterrestrial intelligence, but that potential that there could be technologies from the future that might be able to work backwards in the sense that we could perceive something emanating from our technological future, time travel in essence, and that also could constitute some of the UFO mystery. Richard, I got to throw this thing out there real quick. I got an email the other day from an organization called the National Atomic Testing Museum. They are apparently in association with the Smithsonian Institute. And I get emails from these folks all the time. Frankly, I don't know how I got added to their email list. But, they're often talking about different things, like, Oak Ridge Laboratories and stuff like that, the Manhattan Project. Lo and behold, I got this email the other day, and the letterhead here reads, Area 51, Reverse Engineering at Area 51 and the Red Eagles, Distinguished Lecture by T.D. Barnes and Colonel Gail Peck. And this is a lecture apparently going to be given in Las Vegas, Nevada on February 9th at the National Atomic Testing Museum. So obviously, there seems to be a historical interest in the potential for such things as reverse engineering and these sorts of things going on covertly. Very much, yes. It could be that these technologies are already here.
So it sounds like this is a sort of a form of controlled disclosure that's coming out of Area 51. I want to definitely get into a discussion about time travel. It happens to be one of my favorite topics, but and how that is dealt with in the UFO Singularity. Micah Hanks joining us on the line here on the Conspiracy Show. But let me get a take from you. What do you actually think is going on with the UFO phenomena? Is it? I mean, do you have sort of a better understanding or a better inkling as to what it might be? Have you been able to narrow it down? Are we talking about, ourselves visiting the Earth from the future? Are we talking about extraterrestrials? Could it be from the spiritual realm? What do you think it might be?
Well, Richard, to be honest, I think it could be a lot of those kinds of things. A combination of them, in other words. There are so many in this field who allow ego to kind of get in the way of real logical, and what I, maintain is truly skeptical thought. I'm not someone who goes into this and claims to have a preconception of either belief or disbelief and then tries to just justify my own preconceptions. I go into this kind of clean slate and hope to try and find information and evidence that can help us come to a better determination of what UFOs are. Being a romantic at heart, I've always hoped that there might be extraterrestrial entities that are interacting with Earth in some capacity. On some level, I do think that that's what's going on, but I also think that probably a majority of the things that constitute UFO reports are probably, if not somewhat clandestine and often nascent, kind of innovative new varieties of aerial vehicles that we have built. They very well also may just be things that are, we might even call them physics aberrations, non-dimensional phenomenon, different kinds of things that might not necessarily have to be alien, but that nonetheless could be something that could occur here on Earth and conform to our laws of physics, whether or not they are the known conventional laws of physics. So when it comes to defining what UFOs are, I'm not someone who claims to have contacts in government. I'm not someone who's going to tell you, look, I've got all the answers. I'm going to be someone who will say, here's what we do know, here's what we don't know, and based on the information that we have, this is the most likely scenario. I would probably put it like this. 75 to 80% of most of what we see in the ufological field is probably our own. Then there's that 20% that probably have something to do with extraterrestrial. Maybe we'd call it ultradimensional, I guess, to borrow the term that John Keel used for it.
Micah, let me just jump in here. Sorry, we'll get to that other 5% on the other side. Micah Hanks is with us, the UFO Singularity here on The Conspiracy Show. Stay with us.
The truth goes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Micah Hanks is with us. He's a full-time journalist, radio personality, author, investigator, and he's written for such prestigious magazines as Fate, 14 Times, UFO Magazine, the Journal of Anomalous Sciences, and New Dawn, and has appeared on numerous TV and radio programs, including our very own The Conspiracy Show. We're talking about his new book, The UFO Singularity. First of all, let's finish off that thought. So, how best to explain the UFO phenomena? 85% are basically advanced secret spacecraft developed here on planet Earth. And then you said, what, another 20%? Just some misidentification or weather anomaly, or how would you explain that 20%?
Well, I would recommend probably that 15 or 20% would be somewhere in the neighborhood of, rather than being misidentified, natural phenomena. That always works into this just as well. And again, this justification is primarily working with those objects that are probably going to be intelligently controlled or something other than weather phenomena. I would preface this all by saying that most often people are misidentifying different kinds of natural phenomena and things like that. Known aircraft. This happens, and there's nothing dismissive about saying such, because if you're a good UFO researcher, you're going to take into account the fact that people do that. But of those that remain unidentified, again, I would say that probably around 80% are going to be clandestine technologies from here on Earth, and then we've got 15 to 20% that are going to probably be something else. Some of those may constitute physics aberrations. Some of those may also constitute, dare I say, extraterrestrial, types of craft and things like that. I'm not going to throw any babies out with the bathwater, but, in my way of seeing things, I think that, rather than looking at everything that we term as being ufological in nature and trying to presuppose that they are all extraterrestrial, I'm going to try and look at this more along the lines of what technologies we know to exist. And in my book, of course, The UFO Singularity, I also look at what technological trends we are seeing today that might lead to technologies of tomorrow that without question will help us determine what really lies at the bottom of this UFO mystery. So that, in essence, is the way that I tend to try and look at this. I do call that skeptical, but as you can see, I'm not ruling out those kinds of possibilities. I think that's a very skeptical approach, and it's also keeping things open-minded and open to different possibilities that many of these of the skeptical debunker ilk rule out immediately by trying to literally go into this with a presupposition that no such thing as extraterrestrial life or anything else beyond the known laws of physics might exist here in our midst already.
I'm fascinated by the idea that UFOs, likely terrestrial in origin, possibly originating from our own future. So, walk me through that. I mean, how does that work when, for example, my understanding of time travel is let's say we were to construct a device that would allow us to travel into the future. You could not, or travel back in time. You could not travel back further than the date at which the time travel device was switched on. So if we developed the capability for time travel tomorrow, then someone from the future, the furthest they could travel back would be, my understanding would be, let's say, January 21st, 2013. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does. According to, one potential model for how time travel may work. There are so many different opinions about this, and this is what's very interesting, is that on a philosophical level, Richard, what we often see is that there is there's this kind of I guess academics today tend not to like to speculate a whole lot. They want to say that, we want facts and we want scientific data that backs up these sorts of things, not just, guesswork. But really, in truth, educated guesswork is truly speculation. We have to get speculative quite often, especially in the realms of physics, and hence we hear all the time about speculative physics, right? And in the realms of speculative physics, we have tried to essentially work our minds around the concept of time, which, keep in mind, and fundamentally we have to remember, this is something that is perceived by, if not entirely, kind of an artifact that stems from human perception. When we try and work around such things as grandfather paradoxes and all these sorts of things, for instance, I travel back in time, I cause some sort of a change in the lineage of time that leads to the birth of my grandfather. He is no longer born and no longer a part of this flow of time, and therefore I destroy myself, and there's this destruction of the space-time continuum. I think that that's more of kind of a Hollywood interpretation of what we perceive as being time, and that truly...
Wait a minute, are you saying that the time travel hot tub, which was on television the other night, isn't science fact?
Well, I think that in truth, a lot of people look at what they see in movies, and that greatly influences the way that we try and wrap our heads around a concept as esoteric as literal physical travel through time. I'm not so sure that dimensional aspects would necessarily have to come into this, but of course people, in trying to rectify the problems with such things as a grandfather paradox, they have put into the equation multiple dimensions, string theory, things like that. In my perception, this is partially a hunch, and this is also based on philosophical and scientific discussions I've had with many in academia, a lot of whom are fascinated by UFO phenomena for the same reasons that I am, because they feel that these things may be hints at understanding the greater levels of reality around us, which lie just outside human perception. And that is fundamentally this, that, time is, again, primarily an illusion. And that space and physicality also probably has an illusory nature. And once we realize that all space and time are primarily illusions that are filtered through the human perception, those kinds of things, begin to break down, and those conventional models of time travel break down just as well.
Fair enough. Micah Hanks is with us, the UFO Singularity here on the Conspiracy Show. Again, if UFOs or the pilots of these craft are in fact Earthlings from our future traveling back, how does, for example, the abduction phenomena fit into that? Why would people from the future abducting their own species and subjecting them to unimaginable horrors?
Well, I want to point out that the potential that humans from the future or some technological presence from our perceptual temporal future may constitute some UFO phenomenon. That's one area that I look into the book. When it comes to abduction, I do talk about abduction in the book, and I look at it more in terms of technologies in our midst today that might be utilizing different systems that could account for some abduction reports. Now, if we were to look at this from the perspective, along the lines of what you outlined with your question there, would humans from the future come back in time and abduct humans? And if so, for what purpose? We could speculate a lot of different kinds of things. For instance, what if they were, manipulating genetics and things like that to make the human species of the future better, utilizing technology that they attain, at that point? But then again, in terms of whether or not traveling in time would be, first of all, feasible. Second of all, if altering humans of the present day, our present day, would affect our future selves, we don't know that would indeed be the case. So there are a number of different speculative reasons why a time traveler from the future might come back. I think that the problem is that with ufology, there are so many out there who would tell you this is obviously what's going on. If they're time travelers from the future, they're trying to make us what they are not, or to make us something that they want to be. If they assume that it's an extraterrestrial equation, they would say, well, they're coming here and they're manipulating us and they're engaged in an elaborate hybridization program or something like that. I couldn't give you evidence of either of those things, but we could speculate all day about it, just as I've done with time travel, and that's only one little piece of the greater puzzle here. My gut tells me that a lot of abductions are probably not entirely physical, and that a greater number of them probably have to do with something else that emanates from right here in our midst, here on Earth today.
Of course, the last year we were very much focused on December 21, 2012. In your book, you sort of look 100 years hence, and you talk about what human life will be like in 2112. First of all, why did you pick that date? And then let's get into a discussion about what you think life will be like in 2112, and whether or not that might mean that we're approaching this singularity.
That's a good question. When we look at, again, that singularity archetype, and that notion that change is inevitable and that it's going to occur, and that, any time now humans are going to become something different. I thought it was interesting because people have appended that kind of notion of a transformation to 2012. Initially it was thought that, of course, the Mayan calendar would end and that might be of some significance. The doomsday theorists all thought, this actually means that the end of the world is actually going to transpire. And then there were others who said, well, no, the world isn't actually going to end, but looking at this logically, there might still be something about 2012 that will become significant. And then it becomes a bit of a chicken before the egg argument. Did we make 2012 significant because we wanted it to be, or vice versa? Was it significant, for some other reason? Either way that you want to look at it, 2012 has been kind of considered a gateway year by many, especially those who are more spiritual. And they look at this as a transformation period. And that is very much in keeping with that singularity archetype. Now, at the beginning of the book, I looked back 100 years and began this discussion by talking about the kinds of technology of the future that Thomas Edison had envisioned for the year 2011. He'd been asked, of course, in 1911 about what that technology might be like. And so this book being authored in 2012, I said, much like Edison, what if we look 100 years from now? What kind of technology might we suppose that we would have in our midst in 100 years, in a century? Will we be the same sort of civilization, the same sort of physical beings that we know humans to be today? I would argue that although we may look very similar, we will be fundamentally different, and that will be as a result of advanced technologies that will not only change aspects of our physicality, but may enhance our natural levels of intelligence and perhaps even broaden our ability to perceive aspects of the reality that we think we know so well today.
You talk about transhumanism. I mean, do you see that in 2112 a great many of the inhabitants of this planet will be, to a lesser or greater degree, essentially human cyborgs?
There's always that possibility. I'd always argue, too, that as we things that we have to take into consideration before I get into that really are that, there are so many different kinds of technology on Earth today. And those of the transhumanist ilk, some of whom I was able to interview for this book, including Ben Goertzel, Ph.D., he's an artificial intelligence expert, some who I wasn't able to interview, including Werner Vinge and Ray Kurzweil, best associated with technological singularity today and author of books like The Singularity is Near. Many have proposed that because of the varieties of technology available to us on Earth today, many are influencing each other and helping other areas grow due to the innovations in these various different fields. In other words, it's kind of a cumulative growth, and therefore the rate of growth of technology is becoming greater than exponential. It's growing so much more quickly, and it's taking off at such a rate that at some point, possibly within maybe the next couple of decades, our technology is really going to go through an incredible change, something that is difficult for us at present to even conceptualize. That, again, represents that technological singularity. And if indeed we utilize technologies that become so advanced, I would argue, Richard, that much of what we would consider, synthetic or cyborg or something like that, we may master technology to a level that it will appear or even be, so similar to what we would call organic that you wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two. So if we utilize technologies that are that advanced to supplement ourselves, to enhance our natural levels of intelligence, will we look like cyborgs walking around? No, we'll look like humans, but we will have attained technologies that allow us to change ourselves and perhaps effectively take evolution into our own hands. And I'll tell you this, I'm not sure that I myself am entirely comfortable with that. I don't think many people are, but I think it's also something we'll have to prepare for because it looks like it's really laying there on the horizon.
I spoke with a gentleman a number of years ago at another radio station from China where he's working on an artificial brain. His first name is Hugo, or his last name is Hugo, and I can't remember. Maybe the name will pop to my mind. But he's talking about this transhumanist movement and also artificial intelligence. And he foresees a very scary scenario where you will have, at one point, a certain segment of the population who are poised to essentially merge their human body and their human consciousness with artificial intelligence. And then you will have this other segment of the population who will be so terrified of that prospect that you would essentially have two separate civilizations here on planet Earth that what would ensue would be one of the most unimaginably horrific world wars that we've ever seen. I mean, we're talking about, the planet being destroyed, essentially, the possibility of the planet being destroyed because, of this fear. I want to get your take on that when we come back, and then we'll continue to delve into the UFO singularity. Micah Hanks with us here on The Conspiracy Show. We'll make the phone lines available to you as well. And you can weigh in with your thoughts. Back with more. Stay with us.
As you're staring up at the night sky, ever wonder who's staring back? You're listening to Richard Syrett's Strange Planet.
Welcome back. It was Hugo de Garis, I believe, was the gentleman I spoke to a number of years ago, a researcher in artificial intelligence, also known as evolvable hardware. And at the time, I believe he was working on an artificial brain in China. But he, again, stated that there would be a major war between the supporters and opponents of intelligent machines, and there would be billions of deaths. He said this is almost inevitable before the end of the 21st century, and he suggests that artificial intelligences may simply eliminate the rest of us. And we'd be powerless to stop them. But you do talk about artificial intelligence in the UFO singularity, Micah Hanks, and I'm just wondering what that might have to do with UFOs or how it might help us sort of learn about UFOs?
Well, there are a few reasons, Richard, that those two subjects, UFOs and artificial intelligence, may come into play with one another. One is that, as you'd outlined during the last segment, explaining Hugo's theory there, what if we had a portion of the population that was enhancing themselves technologically, whereas maybe there was another portion that either for economic reasons, maybe there was a disparity and they didn't have access to this information or this technology, they couldn't afford it, or maybe it was being kept away by a portion of the elitist, population, some aspect or element of government or something like that. There could be any number of scenarios that would play out in the mind that would allow one to, surmise why there could be one group that has this technology and one that doesn't, and then some sort of a conflict erupting between the two. This is very similar to a theory that's been put forth by a colleague of mine, Rich Dolan, who's a UFO historian and researcher, and he calls it the breakaway civilization. And so if we wanted to speculate for a moment that there could be an aspect of humanity that literally could utilize technological developments that are kept suppressed from the mainstream and what most of us know to exist, and they utilize that to their own benefit and become what, he calls essentially a breakaway civilization. That could be one aspect of the UFO mystery just as well, and this would entail utilizing advanced intelligences, technologies, perhaps artificial intelligences, for utilization of, this kind of technology that, for whatever reason, would come under the mastery of one group of individuals and not to the rest. So, although that sounds very much like something that could occur in science fiction, that is always a possibility. But coming back to that notion of sci-fi and the way that, films often portray this sort of thing, with all reverence to someone like Hugo, who, I think, probably is very qualified to speak about this sort of a thing, I have to say that, again, I see that Hollywood so easily influences people's perceptions of how artificial intelligence will come about, and then again, what will occur in a world where we, as humans, live alongside intelligence that may be greater than ours. I would argue that, quite the contrary, there seems to be a trend between people who gain intelligence and then, of course, the morals and the code of conduct that comes with the attainment of great power. While, obviously, in history, we have seen that people who attain great power often misuse it. As we get older as a civilization, as we, grow so many years, hence past, the Second World War, and we attain greater technologies, that for purposes of destruction could level the, if not a country, a planet perhaps, we have refrained from using those. We made it through the Cold War without, launching a mutually assured self-destruction style attack as so many feared would occur. Maybe we are advancing, and maybe with intelligence we learn better how to cope with and utilize that technology, and maybe artificial intelligence that exceeded our own levels would do the same, and hopefully we could say that there would be a more positive outcome. Now, again, maybe I'm just being an optimist, but I do think that there are two sides to every equation, and that often Hollywood, with films like Terminator and some of these, it can kind of give us an impression of what may be that is not entirely accurate in terms of what may actually be.
Rich Dolan's a frequent guest on the program, and I'm fascinated by his theory on these breakaway civilizations. I give that a lot of credence. I think that might explain a great deal of the callousness that some of these elite power brokers have for the rest of us, because they have no dog in the hunt anymore. They've got no skin in this game because, I don't know, they're living in some subterranean cavern, or again, going back to statements like Ben Rich and others that have been interviewed by Paula Harris and so forth, they already have these deep space platforms. They don't give a tinker's behind what happens here to the rest of us on planet Earth, because they're already off world. Anyway, let me grab a call here. Andrew has been very patient waiting in Palmerston, Ontario. Andrew, welcome to the Conspiracy Show.
Thank you very much. I have a comment and then one question after that. And I think in regard to human and alien genetic engineering and having a hybrid, I think what has happened, in my view, is that the aliens have evolved to such an extent, having these mental capacities and telepathic communication to almost an extreme end. And I think what they've done is neglected because of that, they may have neglected some of their physical powers, and I think looking at humans being much stronger than the Greys, for example, then they would like to have a hybrid in which they can have some of the human strength in them.
Andrew, let me just hold on. You hold on as well. We'll come back and we'll get your question, your follow-up question. That's a great lead-in to this discussion. Back with more of my conversation with Micah Hanks, the author of the UFO Singularity. If you've got a line, hold on to it. Back with more of The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Serrett.
It's time to redefine reality. This is Richard Serrett's Strange Planet.
Micah Hanks from the UFO Singularity fame joins us and stays with us for the next 15 minutes or so. Andrew from Palmerston, interesting comment on perhaps the motivation behind the abduction phenomena. Could be some sort of genetic engineering. The Greys abducting humans because essentially they want to develop a hybrid, a human-alien hybrid. Andrew, you had a question as well?
Yeah, well, the other question I have is regarding HARP, and they've been sending these strong signals for years and years. What I was interested to learn is, what is the result of all these years of using power like that and transmitting these huge amounts of frequencies, and what is good come out of it? That's what I'm interested in.
Well, maybe HARP is best left for another program, although I don't know, maybe Micah has a comment on that. But do you want to address maybe first the alien abduction motivation first, Micah?
Well, when it comes to alien abduction, again, I'm not going to ever say that one thing is occurring and something else is not, simply because I have a preconception toward or a bias toward belief or disbelief. What I will tell you is that in many instances, and of course, much to the dismay of my friends who actually claim to be abductees themselves, scientifically I have a hard time justifying claims of alien abduction. I do think that there's something clearly going on, but there is a tremendous lack of physical evidence supporting this. Now, does this mean that there is a very clever technology behind this and that they're capable of, distancing themselves from what we are capable of recognizing as an actual physical presence in our midst? Maybe that is the case. But I also think sometimes that there are other levels of not only reality but also human perception that come into play when it comes to in terms of trying to understand with and reconcile with the abduction mythos that has emerged into our culture. I have a lot of questions about it. I could probably author an entire book about really what's happening with abduction. I haven't seen a lot of evidence that really supports the idea that we are in the midst of an ongoing, elaborate genetic hybridization, program as enacted by these alien Greys or something along those lines. And that could be. Who knows? But again, I haven't seen scientific evidence for that. And it may be that in the coming years, part of this technological growth that I'm talking about in the UFO Singularity will allow us to utilize new kinds of technologies, and that may become apparent. It may be that that's exactly what's happening, and we will come to terms with that, or perhaps we'll rise against it and fight it off. Who knows, if it's something that we consider to be a bad thing. But I do think that there's obviously some sort of a non-human intelligence component that fits in here. I just couldn't tell you if it's something that's tampering with our genetics.
Let's talk about some of the current scientific trends that you say are leading us to advanced technology that we have observed in various UFO reports.
Sure. Well, I think that a lot of the time when we talk about UFO reports, as we, of course, do with the UFO Singularity, we're talking about advanced aviation, or aeronautics that would allow, an aircraft to travel several hundreds of thousands of, light years from one planet to another, and, of course, several thousand miles an hour right here in Earth's atmosphere. There are already aircraft that have been observed, at least since, the late 1940s, early 1950s, that appear to allow whoever the occupants of these craft are, to do this. If they were physical beings, the speed at which many of these UFO craft are purported to travel should not be very kind to physical occupants unless they're utilizing an advanced variety of physics, to not only perhaps allow the movement of that craft, but also to preserve the occupants therein. Now, there are ways of getting around that. One could be that these craft aren't actually controlled by a physical occupant at all. They could be remote controlled. As Rich Dolan has put forth, there could be a variety of machine intelligence with them. And furthermore, if we were to speculate that there was some sort of an advanced biological entity that had supplanted the physicality or the biology of themselves with aspects of, or, whether it be a cybernetic or a cyborg kind of recreation of themselves, something literally almost along the lines of the Transformer films that we see, where we have these, almost entirely robotic beings, or if it's something that is, something even further beyond that. I could even, say that it's something that maybe beyond what we could really speculate about right now with our known levels of intelligence. There could be any number of ways that an advanced intelligence might get around the problems associated with UFO craft. Now, in the UFO singularity, something I try and look at is the utilization of, again, greater than average levels of, attainable human intelligence today, natural levels of human intelligence, and how a far more advanced being might literally begin to perceive reality differently. This is where, Richard, in terms of the way that I look at, rather than calling it time travel, non-temporal phenomenon comes into the question. I've argued that if a highly advanced, perhaps, even cybernetically modified or enhanced brain becomes far more efficient than natural brain function in humans today, this kind of an entity, this kind of an intelligence might be capable of perceiving beyond the known limits of space and time that we know. And again, at that point, if humanity attains that kind of intelligence and that technology, what will we know about our universe? Will we be able to perceive aliens? Will we be able to see into the future as well as the past? Functional telepathy, these kinds of things. There are a lot of questions that, again, I do think work into the UFO equation as well.
All right, let's say hello to Keith in Rochester. Good evening, Keith. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Yes, I approach these topics from a point of morality. Abductions were mentioned, and that's underhanded behavior. Until these creatures are willing to come to us man to man as stand-up guys, which would mean basically landing on the White House lawn, I don't care how advanced they are, I just shrug them off as if they don't come to us, again, stand up, they probably really don't have anything to offer to us. I always refer people to the very famous 1951 movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still. We need that Michael Rennie character to come to us and to reach out to us. And if they aren't willing to shake hands with us, I'm asking the guest, really, what good are they? What is their true worth?
Excellent point, Keith. Micah, your thoughts?
Yeah, Keith, I have to agree with you. If there is indeed a physical and perhaps an extraterrestrial presence underlying the UFO enigma, what's so troubling about it is the subversive element there. The fact that there isn't this willingness to come out, shake hands, make contact. With this popular Ancient Aliens meme that we see appended to the popular television program of the same name, we have this notion that extraterrestrial intelligences did just that in ancient times, that they came down to Earth and that they interacted with humankind and that they literally granted us some sort of advanced technology that helped or maybe even directly manipulated and modified us to make us what we are today. Many would argue that undermines natural human ingenuity. However you want to look at it, why would they do this in the ancient past and perhaps not do it today? Or if they did it in the ancient past, was it just as subversive as it appears to be today? Either way, that secrecy is very unsettling, and if there's anything to the abduction claims, then that's a part of it that is really troubling to me. Why do you remain in the shadows? Why don't you come out and let us know what you're doing? And are we not allowed to be willing participants? Are we made to be essentially cattle? Who knows?
Keith in Rochester, thank you for the call as always. Well, there are those who theorize that the abduction phenomena, whether you want to include crop circles and animal mutilations in that whole sort of grab bag, that's all, even the sort of the view, the common view of what UFOs are, little green men traveling from distant galaxies. This has all been created as a cover story in order to distract us from what's really going on. And what's really going on may, in fact, have more to do with, as you say, advanced human technologies, which may include, visits from our future. In other words, the UFO myth has been created in order to distract from something that's even more unimaginable.
That's unsettling too. And I often think about that we hear about, some of the conspiracy types like Bill Cooper and many others over the past, several decades who have come forth and said, there's a lot less going on here that has to do with actual extraterrestrials and more with the creation the intentional creation of a meme in our culture and in our societies that is geared toward leading people, or rather, more appropriately, misleading people into believing one thing so that something else entirely can be going on behind the scenes. But here's what we're left with, Richard. We're left with the absolutely, pardon the term, but unalienable truth, I guess.
Nicely put.
Maybe not as best used, but certainly sounded good for the circumstances. You can't remove the fact that we are dealing with some variety of what appears to be an intelligently controlled technology in our midst, or perhaps several varieties of different phenomena that at times appear to be intelligently controlled, at times maybe do not appear to be any kind of mechanized framework or any kind of a machine, but they are nonetheless representative of some kind of intelligence or consciousness. And so, whether it be a space-time anomaly, a physics aberration, a non-human, non-physical intelligence that communicates through some sort of a brain state or altered state, there are different levels of ways that different kinds of, anomalous activities could occur. But with UFOs, we clearly see some technological presence. Whose are they? They have to belong to someone.
So again, do you pin any hopes on, let's say, 2112 as being the year that this will all sort of make sense, and this will be sort of disclosure day, for lack of a better term?
I don't really. I think, again, in purposes of framing, the sort of the history and the lineage of these sorts of things, in the book I look at the year 1911 and Thomas Edison supposing what will technology in 100 years be like. And at this pivotal period in our history that many pinned to the year 2012, and of course the end of the Mayan calendar, we're beyond that now, and unless we're all a bunch of ghosts, we survived somehow too. Many feel that there was a transformation, maybe there was a change. Some would even argue it was an imperceptible kind of change, and that we're still undergoing that change right now. It's already, that the beginning has taken place, and we're in the midst of it now. Whatever the case may be, I say, what about the future? What in 100 years will we look back on ourselves today and be correct about? Will the future that we predict today be what we think it is? I think it'll be a future full of vast potentials that are so far out and so, again, alien to us that we can't even imagine many of those potentials. But in terms of the actual date that I would suppose that we'll begin to see a lot of this, to borrow from the others of the futurist and the transhumanist ilk, what Ray Kurzweil refers to as singularitarians would probably tell you is that around the year 2029 or 2030, we would begin to see the beginning of what's called the knee of the curve, the point at which the beginnings of these technologies will become apparent, and we'll begin to see those kinds of trends that will lead to an unimaginable future. And that, of course, will be that post-singularity future where we will be dealing with artificial intelligences, new kinds of aeronautics, and a variety of other kinds of technologies that we couldn't even conceive of today that will fundamentally change who we are and how we view ourselves in the context of our greater reality and the universe as we know it.
Micah, tell us about your website, Graylien Report. What can we find there?
Well, you'll find everything at the Graylien Report. I deal with everything from politics and history to conspiracy, something your listeners, of course, will enjoy. I'm best known as a ufologist these days, and so there'll be a lot of nuts and bolts reporting and dealing with, and trying to understand UFOs. We also talk about cryptozoology from time to time, and that website is www.gralien. That's GraylienReport.com. You can find me on Twitter, Micah Hanks, easy enough to find there. There's also a Facebook like page for the Graylien Report. Lots of stuff people can follow, and a podcast each week of the same name, Graylien Report. Just check it out online. Of course, you can Google that just as well.
And I've also linked up to your website at richardsyrett.com. They just go to tonight's show and click on Micah Hanks, and it'll take you right to Graylien Report. Micah, real pleasure meeting you, and I'm hoping to get down to the International UFO Congress in Phoenix next month. I know you'll be there. You'll be speaking about this very topic, I'm guessing.
I certainly will. And Richard, let's grab a cup of coffee if you do, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Micah. Micah Hanks. All right. And you can also say hello to me at Twitter at Richard Syrett, S-Y-R-E-T-T, Richard Syrett. Love to hear from you. And once again, a very special hello to our new affiliate in Springfield, Missouri, KWTO.
Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at StrangePlanetPodcast.com.